For nearly a week, the giants waded out into the surf of the shivering sea. Jon looked on from the Eastwatch stairwell as they lifted the tetrahedrons amongst jagged rock formations. Nearly every degree on either side of the wall would make a ship's approach nearly impossible. Jon made his way down the stairwell as he was approached by the Onion Knight.
Lord Commander, I fear our usefulness here at Eastwatch may be coming to an end. If I may be so bold, I would like to depart and sail up the last river to moor near the last hearth. Should the eastern invasion succeed, we could ferry the families of the Watch down to White Harbor if needed.
Davos finished, and Jon immediately agreed with the strategy.
The men would very much appreciate the possibility of their families being far from harm. I'll authorize both vessels be cleared for immediate departure.
Forgive me, good sir, but I have relinquished command of Lady Arya's vessel Avalanche. If they were to sail, it would need to be under her own command, whether she is on board or not.
Jon digested this information before responding. The pair of men reached the catwalk, and Jon chose his words carefully.
I'll speak with Arya. She shouldn't be residing here much longer.
The men parted after Davos acknowledged Jon's intentions. Samwell pretended to be preoccupied, though he made it obvious he was waiting for a moment to command Jon's attention.
I was hoping to convince you to leave.
Jon jested, and Sam's face soured temporarily until he recognized Jon's wide smile. Sam sighed heavily until he eventually returned the smile.
I've defended the wall at your side before. Why should this assault prove any different?
Because now, you have a wife and son to protect.
As do you, my old friend.
Jon leaned his head back in irony. He should have known better than to get into an argument with Sam.
I do have reason for your departure. I am in need of a scholar. I believe you're the man for the job. Perhaps the only man.
Jon suggested, and Sam's ears seemed to perk up. The two men checked for privacy amongst the thousands of possible ears present at Eastwatch. Once Jon ensured they were not being overheard, Jon reached into his cloak and pulled out some folded parchment. Jon presented it quietly to Sam, and after a moment of eye contact, Jon encouraged him to unfold them.
Runes? What do you expect from them? From me?
Sir Davos will be sailing up the last river and mooring at the last hearth. There in the Meister's library there is a book, a translation from Old Valyrian to Common. I need these runes interpreted.
That shouldn't be too difficult. I'm sure Gilly would appreciate seeing little Jon.
Wouldn't you as well?
Jon offered, but Sam seemed reluctant to admit he desired to see his son.
It's a complicated matter, but at least now I have an excuse to go and see him.
I thought you'd might.
Jon smiled as Sam continued studying the parchment.
Where did these come from? The ink seems fresh.
It's better that you don't know exactly. But we think it has something to do with Old Valyria. Some important knowledge they wanted to preserve, but keep secretive.
Once I have an answer, what shall I do with it?
Relay it back to me, wherever I may be. Determine for yourself its level of importance. But the less people that know, the better. This new Targaryen king seems to be obsessed with magic and prophecy.
You're not trying to get rid of me again?
Samwell asked in jest, but Jon's face remained stern.
I need to go see Bran. Safe travels, Sam.
The two old friends embraced, and Sam buried the parchment deep inside his cloak. Bran had been moved to a private room close to Qyburn's laboratory. Jon knocked softly as Mira answered the door and greeted him. Jon then looked over to Bran. He was sitting up, awake, and the color had returned to his face. Jon felt a rush of relief come over him. He would have to commend Qyburn for his care of his brother.
Good morning, Lord Commander.
Bran stated with a smile. Jon sat at his bedside, and Arya came up behind him.
Bran has been filling us in on this. Viserys. Apparently he's your cousin Jon, born to Daenerys' older brother.
Arya finished as Jon looked back over to Bran.
What does he want?
Put simply, you, Jon.
Jon simply scoffed, but Bran remained serious.
He has amassed several weapons, the fiery hand, a red priestess, the horn of winter, as well as a dragon egg.
Jon's face slumped at this news. Bran looked over to Arya as she presented her leather satchel to him. He handled it carefully and observed the scarlet scaled egg the size of a bread loaf.
What does this have to do with me?
His vendetta seems personal in nature. your rejection of the Targaryen name, your involvement in Daenerys' banishment, and your abdication of the Iron Throne.
Jon digested this information as he handed the satchel back to Arya. She seemed confused as Jon again rejected anything having to do with his birth father's house.
Your disgust for anything dragon-related is ill-founded, Jon.
Bran finished as Jon's head snapped back towards him.
You weren't there, Bran. That afternoon, Rhaegal massacred that village. All the while, I was helpless to convince him otherwise.
You are correct, Jon. You were helpless. But you are also incorrect. I was there.
Whatever do you mean, Bran?
Jon demanded stoically as he stood to his feet.
Rhaegal did not elect to act outside your control. He burned that village because I forced him to.
Jon was in shock. He couldn't imagine why Bran would commit such a horrendous act.
I'll admit, your judgment may be harsh, but it was necessary. No possible path existed for less than 1 million people dying of this disease, if I had not acted.
Jon was furious but did his best to contain his emotion. With a pending invasion, Rhaegal would be an asset to the realm. Jon wanted to blame Bran for this, but he realized it was his own decision to break his bond with his dragon, not Bran's.
So you can see the future?
I elect not to most of the time, but sometimes it cannot be avoided. What I see is not definite, but a possibility. All beings have free will, and based off those decisions, ranging from major to seemingly insignificant, have a drastic effect on future events.
So, you evaluated all the possible scenarios before taking control of Rhaegal and committing mass murder?
Indeed, I did, Jon. I had been researching those events for years prior to taking action. If you knew what I have known, I'd expect you would make the same decision.
Jon's heart broke at this realization. Bran had never been the same since he returned from beyond the wall.
Bran, what has happened to you?
Bran broke eye contact and sighed heavily before responding.
Jon, what if I told you that when you depart this room, if you open the door with your left hand, it will lead to gruesome death of a loved one. If you use your right hand, then the realm will be cast into civil war where millions die.
Jon's face blanked as he pondered Bran's hypothetical, or what Jon prayed was a hypothetical.
Imagine watching those you care about make decisions that will eventually lead to their demise, and be powerless to help them avoid it.
Bran finished, and Jon suddenly felt guilty about chiding Bran for his own decision-making.
I can't imagine a more torturous existence, Bran. You're a prisoner inside your own mind. Please forgive me.
It is an unforgiving existence. Some view knowledge as power, but I found it as nothing more than a burden beyond reprieve. It is why I find little to smile about these past 2 decades.
Jon wished someone else would say something to interrupt this awkwardness. Just as Jon had hoped, Arya broke the silence.
Bran, while we were sailing, you made a claim. It may have been a result of the poppy, but I fear you were being truthful.
Arya paused, and Bran buried his face into his hands.
Arya, please. I'm begging you. Don't ask me these questions.
His attempt to dissuade her appeared to be ineffective and only intrigued her more. Jon attempted to change the topic of conversation by interrupting Arya's pleading.
What of the runes we observed on these different weapons? Do they have any effect of the events to come?
They do, Jon. More so than I can possibly explain. But please, no more questions. I'm begging you.
He pleaded with as much emotion as Arya had. Still, she would not be deterred.
Bran, where is Gendry? You said he was taken to the wall. Where on the wall?
Castle Black.
Bran revealed remorsefully with tears streaming down his face.
That's impossible. Sir Hunt's reported Castle Black raised the black flag. It was left unmanned except for a fire watch.
What of the prisoner? The prisoner that was brought to Castle Black at Qyburn's request. A watchman said the Lord Commander himself authorized it.
I authorized no such prisoner transfer, Arya.
Jon's words rang across the room for a few moments. Arya's face contorted as some sort of reality set in, Jon had surmised. After a few additional agonizing seconds, Arya sprung from the room and out into the courtyard. Both direwolves followed her closely as the door slammed shut behind him. Jon stood to follow her as he reached for the door handle before suddenly stopping and looking back to Bran. His face again was buried in his hands as Jon looked down to his own before deciding to open the door with his right hand, praying Bran's hypothetical was indeed hypothetical. Jon sprang out into the busy courtyard just as Arya's steed galloped furiously out of the main gate with Nymeria close at her heel. Ghost followed energetically up to the open gate. The direwolf circled frantically, looking to Jon for permission to follow. Jon then bellowed for all the courtyard to hear.
Ghost, to me. I require a readied horse, and an immediate ranger loadout, and someone find me Sir Hunts.
Jon commanded as he removed his sword sheath and mounted Ice onto the nearest saddled horse at the stables. A steward sprinted from the mess hall with saddlebags full of a month's supply of food. Without instruction, the steward prepped Jon's horse, and he attempted to calm a frantic Ghost.
You called for me, Lord Commander?
Jon mounted his steed and looked down to the Castle Black commander and the second-ranking member of the Watch.
You have the watch, Sir Hunts. I must see to an issue of the crown.
Your place is here, Jon. You above all others know this.
My duties as Warden of the North compels my involvement, sir, and no need of quoting our bylaws. I wrote them myself.
Sir Hunt spat upon the ground before responding. Jon had to hurry. Arya was likely a mile or two from Eastwatch. Any further, and he would not be likely to catch her before she arrives at Castle Black.
What are our rules of engagement with the foreigners?
Whatever you see fit, Sir Hunts. Please inform Ser Davos that Lord Samwell's instructions should be given utmost priority. Numerous lives hang in the balance.
As you will, Lord Commander. Any additional orders?
Hold the wall, Sir Hunts. Hold the wall.
Ordered Sir Jon as he broke from the stables. Ghost set into a sprint across the snow-covered plains of the Gift. Jon galloped hard, knowing Arya would refuse sleep on her trek. Jon would have to trust in Ghost's tracking abilities. What was at stake? Only the gods knew for sure, in addition to Bran, of course, Jon thought to himself.